If I ruled the world, I love 'em, baby.
Okay, so If I Ruled the World podcast welcomes Lars Frederiksen. How you doing, my brother?
I'm doing good, just kind of getting up and going, up and running. It's kind of early, for the world, really, but most of the world anyway, but afternoon for me.
Where are you calling from right now?
San Francisco, California.
So what are you doing? You cooking breakfast for the little guy?
I was, now finished, but so we're all fed and ready to rock.
Right on. Cool. All right, so I want to talk to you about I know you did some shows with the Old Firm Casuals. You're about to do some shows with Old Firm Casuals, one of the shows being Brooklyn, New York. But before we get into that, just want to say real quick, holy shit, Rancid's playing with the Misfits, huh? Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, that's going to be pretty insane. Over time, over my lifetime, I've done, I've made a few bucket lists, and when I was a kid, I always thought, if I could do something in Madison Square Garden, just because I was a huge wrestling fan, And I remember Snuka jumping off the top of the cage on the Don Morocco, that made a lasting impression on me. And just the fact that, the three things I wanted to do as a kid was play the Oakland Coliseum, play Saturday Night Live, and then obviously the Holy Trinity would be playing Madison Square Garden, which, at the age of 47, that's happening. It's kind of it's pretty cool, So now I have to find a new bucket list, but I'm definitely, one of them's driving a tank, so I'll just go from there.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy too, considering I'm sure you're a pretty big Damned fan as well.
I do like the Damned, but they never were like a. Of course, I obviously respect them and enjoy their music, but they weren't like a big thing. To me, I was more of into like GBH and Social Distortion and The Last Resort and shit like that. Crucifix and stuff. The Damned were great, but by the time that I started getting going off, they were already sort of past that thing doing goth records. So that wasn't really my trip, but obviously. Mass amount of respect for them, obviously very iconic and lovely guys. So, of course, it's always great to be able to play with them. We just played a few shows with them recently. So, the thing for me is just being able, honestly, it's very grateful that the Misfits asked us to be part of this whole deal. With them, you're
talking to someone who has a Crimson Ghost tattooed on their arm for sure, man.
Sure.
It's the biggest deal for me, and the fact that you guys, the Rancid catalog, I celebrate so much.
Right.
You guys have like 100 amazing songs, so I think like the combination of the two is really what's enticing. I saw them in Jersey with Suicidal and Murphy's Law, which I love those bands, but man, to see them with Rancid and like you said, MSG, at this point of the game for someone like you like you said, to be 47, and I remember the WWF and Don the Rock Morocco and all that stuff, man. So it's great that you guys are like right underneath the Misfits for this show. It's got to be freaking amazing.
No, it's an incredible feeling, and obviously the Misfits, along with the Damned, they're iconic. They're paved the way of history, so bands like Rancid could kind of come through. So
yeah,
it's going to be a great show. Like I said, I'm just on a personal note, though. It's something that's very big for me, just on the personal level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and from the outside looking in, we saw them ask Murphy's on the East Coast, Murphy's Law, the Cro-Mags. How did it come about? How it must be? Is it a dogfight to get on, or they just said, "Hey"?
I don't really know. I honestly, like, it's not like I don't know. I would never personally lobby to get on a show or anything like that. They invited us, so that's cool.
Very cool. Everything from Saturday Night Live to the Misfits. Lars won't lobby to be on it. Fair enough.
Well, I've lived I've lived a life filled with gratitude. I've been, taken places that I never thought I would go. I've seen things I never thought I'd see. I've met people, who I've never thought, I've had some crazy, wild experiences, and I'm very grateful that I've been able to do it through music and had the opportunity, you know what I mean? So to me, every day on two legs is a good day.
So funny enough, just recently, like on Facebook, we were talking, somebody asked a question like what a Mount Rushmore of vocalists were. And for me, I threw 3 different people on, and you were one of them. You were one of the 4, because I love the melodic, like you're in a punk band and you have these punk roots, but you have so much melody, even in like the heaviest shit that you do, like something like Dead American from Lars and the Bastards record. How did like melody become such a big part of you, considering that sometimes the genre doesn't really allow for that?
Well, first of all, thank you for the compliment. I've been to Mount Rushmore once in my life. It's a pretty aspiring kind of thing, but that's a side note. I don't know. I think, listening to the music I grew up listening to, I mean, the first band I ever heard was Kiss, and that was when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And, I've always been attracted to melody and harmony and stuff like that. And it probably goes all the way back to my mom's, Danish drinking music, so, huge choruses, catchy hooks. And maybe that's why I fell in love with Oi music, because that's kind of what that was, Yeah. You take bands like the Cockney Rejects or Cox Bar or The Business, and, I've always loved the harmony, and I've always been able to enjoy bands like ACDC or Rose Tattoo or, but I think there's so many influences on my life, so many different kinds of genres. I love skinhead reggae. I love, ska and, the two-tone stuff, of course. And,
it's funny. I was going to say, it's funny that you mentioned AC/DC, because like on the new Old Firm Casuals record, there's a song called Casual Rock and Roll. And when I was listening to it, I was just like, holy shit, this definitely feel like the record is fantastic. And I feel like it allows you to explore a lot of the things that, like, let's say Life Won't Wait let you do. I mean, a little bit heavier, of course, but like Casual Rock and Roll really, like, while I was listening to it, I was like, oh, this has like a total AC/DC boogie to it.
Well, I mean, they were one of the first bands. Like, it basically went Kiss, Cheap Trick in the Cars, and then I heard AC/DC in 78 or whatever, and it was before Highway to Hell. I think my brother had the Power Age, or was it Power Age? Probably had the Power Age record. And it's got Down Payment Blues, Bolt to Bite On, What's Next to the Moon, Gone Shootin', which I think is one of the, that's like my all-time go-to AC/DC song. I think, and then after that was punk rock, so, and reggae, The Harder They Come soundtrack made its way into my house in like 1979, 1980. So, I think, the Old Firm Casuals, like, it's obviously very different than Rancid, but I think Holger Dansk is like a snapshot into our record collections. And I can speak for everybody in the band. I know that for sure, because we're all into the same stuff, some, like Casey, the bass player and the other lead vocalist in the band, him and Paul were in hardcore bands. And that's when we were at a 3-piece and starting out, it sort of set us a little bit different in a different way, because they approached the music that we were making from that place. Me, I was coming in doing, trying to do something else, keep it a little bit more streamlined, stripped down kind of stuff. And what they brought to the table, really sort of made it blossom and develop a little bit quicker than I thought it would, So, and then the addition of Gabe, who's been around the punk scene for 30 years, you know what I mean? He's been around touring and different kinds of bands, and he's like a phenom, he's a phenomenal guitar player. And at this point, I think just gravitating towards more of that rock and roll kind of thing for us seemed like the right thing to do. I mean, we started kind of messing with it, on Butcher's Banquet, with Noddy Holder and the song of Butcher's Banquet. It was sort of the natural progression for us to go to more of that Rose Tattoo, AC/DC kind of Aussie rock, but then we got Slade kind of stuff, and the sky's the limit. To me, that was always like, I was listening to Motorhead, Rose Tattoo, AC/DC, and Slade at the same time I was listening to The Last Resort, The Business, Social Distortion, Circle Jerks, Agnostic Front, Cro-Mags, Madball. You know what I mean? Like, to me, it was all street music, and I found just as much in common with those styles than I did to everything else I was listening to. You know what I mean? And I got exposed, like when we moved to Denmark, after my mom and dad were splitting up.
Yeah.
My older cousin was listening to like the Walkers and Mabel and Sweet and a lot of the what were they called? Chicory Tip or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's more, and T-Rex and all that stuff. So, I was getting exposed to all that stuff very, very early. A lot of that glam stuff, David Bowie, you know what I mean? So I think it's always there. In my formative years, I was getting a wide variety of different kinds of styles. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And speaking of, you mentioned Denmark in there, and I know, just looking at some of your stuff, the name of the record is Hoger Dansk, which is a Viking, I believe, and even your ESP guitar is named Volsung, which is like Nordic mythology. I'm assuming that's all coming from you and those formative years of being in Denmark.
Yeah, I mean, my mom is Danish. She's pretty much straight off the boat. She's still here on a green card, still a Danish citizen. And I think because the country's so small, I think there's a sense of pride, you know what I mean? And my mom sort of instilled that culture and those values into myself and my brother growing up. You know what I mean? It was always a little bit different of a household than sort of my quote unquote American friends. It's like we celebrated Christmas. We'd open presents on Christmas Eve. You know what I mean?
Me too.
Yeah, and I think that's just more of a European style. I think we were very, my mom was very accepting to different cultures, to different races. We weren't religious at all.
You mean that's not just Long Island Italian?
But yeah, I mean, so it's like, yeah, I think the environment that, myself and my brother grew up in, it was very accepting. I mean, she hated the fact that we were into the punk and skinhead thing, but she loved our friends. Like I remember having Social Distortion. They played in Campbell at the American Legion Center, and, they came over to the house because, we were friends. And, they slept in the living room floor. My mom was making them breakfast in the morning and frozen hamburgers at night before the show. And they were perfectly fine to, wear eyeliners, charge their hair, and, wear boots and ripped jeans and leather jackets. But Lord, God forbid if we did, you know what I mean? So that's kind of a crazy little juxtapose. But, we ended up doing it anyways. My brother, obviously was, we didn't really give a shit. My mom I think she probably was afraid of getting deported or something. I don't know. But,
yeah, I think parents have that fear for their kids sometimes, especially when it's culture that they're not used to, and all of us grew up on that stuff. So, yeah, I would imagine, to this day, my dad, when I play music, he's like, why don't you throw more Latin influence in and people will pay attention? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I love Social Distortion. You keep bringing up Social Distortion, which is fun, and I love to talk to people about things that influence them. For me, my favorite Social D record is Between Heaven and Hell. I was just curious what would be yours.
Oh, I like them all. I think they naturally progress in such a beautiful way. Mommy's Little Monster obviously made a huge impact onto me on and the Mainliner 7-inch in the 1945, all that early stuff, because I was around for that. So in going to see them, it seemed like every 3 months, and I became friends with Dennis and Mike and Brent and Derek. That was the lineup that I met. And so we remained friends, especially me and Dennis, God rest his soul. So they made a big impact on me. I think what I liked about them is that they had that energy that I was getting, that I wanted to to hear. Like, they were rock and roll enough and punk enough, and they had melody. They had good songs. Telling Them is it's one of the best songs ever written in my opinion. So one of the first songs I ever learned on guitar.
Yeah, they're one of those bands that definitely progressed in sound, and Mike just became a very confident songwriter, and
Right.
now now he just like definitely keeps writing that stuff. I'm waiting for that new record for sure.
Yeah, they're making it now. I mean, one of my closest friends in the world is Johnny Two Bags, who was in this band called the Cadillac Tramps, and back in the day, and he's playing guitar for SD now. But Mike is like he's an iconic figure, you know what I mean? And you know, he's a great songwriter. He's as Social Distortion is like Americana now. They're like up there with like Johnny Cash and you know, it's just they're sort of, you know, when you think about American punk rock or American music, you can put Social Distortion in that sentence of those iconic bands without hesitation. You know what I mean? You know, they started off doing some heavy punk shit, and then they've kind of moved into a different direction. To me, the most natural progression of a band. You got to mature, because that keeps it interesting. But you know, to me, that they sort of hold it down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and for me, like what I love about them is what I love about you, what I love about Rancid, Old Firm, is there's melody that you could hold on to. For me, I'm such a big melody guy. I'm like everything from Rancid, obviously, to like a Super Drag. You know what I'm saying? So
Sure.
How has like this tour been going with this new record?
Oh, with the Casual stuff?
Yeah,
it's been going good. You know, we're going to places we haven't gone to. You know, or we haven't have been for a while. I mean, I don't think we've been out in the East Coast for, 6 years. We concentrated mostly in Europe. With everybody's, Casey plays bass in the Cro-Mags and the John and Mackie version of it. And, Gabe at the time was playing with the Sydney Ducks. So they were sort of active, and I think they're now, I don't really know what's going on with them, but so I'm in like 58 bands. So, getting the time and space to kind of do different things, it's been sort of a slower process. Paul broke it right as we were really kind of picking it up and really, kind of getting out there and doing our thing. Paul had, broke his arm in Europe, compound fracture. And it took him over a year to heal. And there was never really a question of like getting another drummer and carrying on. It's just, he's such a, big part of the sound as is everybody, that there was no way to really kind of move on, without that, you can't do that. And I always hated when bands sort of did that. When we were over in Europe and he broke his arm and we had to use 4 different drummers to get through the tour. Yeah. It was a financial decision. It's because we would have lost a lot of money that none of us had, so that was, part of that decision. But, we're just getting out there and doing our thing, you know what I mean? And we've sort of, even though we put out, so much music, I think we put out like 12 7-inches in 2 years, and we were just in compilations, and that For the Love of It All double vinyl is like a collection of all sans the first EP. But we're always pretty prolific, and I think that the more and more we're out there playing, the more and more we're finding what this band is. So we're just happy to get out there on stage and do our thing. You know what I mean?
And what is your songwriting process like? I mean, you do, you're in famously 58 bands, you produce, you do a lot. When it comes down to Old Firm Casuals and, listening to this record, I hear a lot of you, but I'm curious, do you come in with it, or what is that songwriting process like?
Well, I always try to have everybody contribute, that's something that's very important to me. And it's something that we do in Rancid, me and Tim are the primary songwriters with Rancid. Matt and Brandon always have, it's kind of like this, man. Like I could take an Old Firm Casual song and bring it to Rancid, and it would be a completely different song, and vice versa. If the guys in Rancid played it, I mean, you're only as good as the people that you play with. You know what I mean? So as far as the songwriting process goes, it's like, I can't take any credit really. 'Cause for me, well, somebody once explained it to me as like connecting to, and it's going to sound fucking kind of hippie, but the psychic telephone. Like you just kind of get these ideas, and you get this, you know, you hear this melody, or you hear a riff, or you hear something, and I don't know where it comes from. And it's really easy to say that it comes from me, but that I just think that, I don't know. I just don't think, I don't know. But I'll think of something, you know, or I'll catch something, you know, or read something or whatever it is, and it'll inspire, or it'll trigger. You know, I'll meet somebody. You know, I recently met this person who's become a really close friend of mine, rapidly. She's inspired, like, you know, a bunch of songs, you know, like all at once, you know what I mean? So it's just something like that, you know. I'm sort of going through some massive personal stuff right now, a lot of upheaval and a lot of change. And, that's been inspiring too. It comes from different places, you know what I mean? For me, it's always come from like I always got to really dig deep in a lot of senses, you know. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's harder, you know. But when you have good songwriting partners, like I got Paul and Casey, and a lot of the times I'm bouncing off ideas off Paul first, and, you know, we just kind of come up with something, you know, casual rock and roll. Like, Butcher's Banquet, for instance, that's a song I'd written for the Bastards, and we would sound check with that. I remember specifically on a European tour, we were sound checking with that. And I just remember playing the riff and going, there's no way I'm going to be able to sing over this, you know? And then the Anti-Nowhere League were making a new record, and Nick we had talked, and he asked me to help him co-write some Anti-Nowhere League songs. So I said, sure. And I remember I was in the kitchen, and that riff just kind of came back into my head, and I started playing. I was like, oh my God, fuck. This is the Bastards warm-up sound check song to kind of see where we're at with levels and stuff. And I started writing some lyrics, and I called up Nick, and I said, who's Animal, right? And I called Nick up, and I said, hey, dude, I got this song, and I think it's going to be a perfect Anti-Nowhere League song. And he says, well, can you record it and send it to me, make me a voice memo? And I said, sure. And I said, but I can't sing the lyric over it because it's not really, my brain's not really working over that. And he said, fine. So I sent him the riff, and I sent him the lyrics, and I kind of sent him the melody or whatever. And he's like, I love it. We're going to use it. You know, keep them coming, you know, right? So I'm like, cool. So a year or so passes by, you know, the new Anti-Nowhere League record comes out. I look for Butcher's Banquet, and it's not on it. So I was like, well, fuck that. I'm going to keep this track, and I got the guy, you know, who can sing it, named Casey Watson. And that song was written for him. You know what I mean? That was, no one could have sang that song like Casey Watson. That's his song. And the only way that's for that song to see its full potential was if Casey sang it. You know what I mean? And he destroyed it. He fucking destroyed it. He owns it, you know? So, I don't know if I got sidetracked, but I just started thinking about that.
No, not at all. And like, I was thinking to myself, like, as someone who writes songs as well, like, you know, even for you, like you said, you're 47, and it's probably still the best thing ever to hit that right chord that you've been waiting for, finding that right melody for that chorus, finding the right intro riff. Like, I would imagine these are the things that still feel so good that keep you writing more songs, and people look to you for these songs. Like, you know, like you said, he asked you to help him write songs. Like, I feel even like with your production, you know, it's like everyone, I don't know, you've established yourself as like this fucking songwriter, man.
Well, I mean, I appreciate that. To me, I just try to do what comes natural. I just want to make music that I want to listen to, you know. So, like I said, some songs come easy, like you said, that golden moment when you're like, fuck, you know what I mean? And I remember with that, having that experience with Motherland, you know. I remember sitting down with Paul. I was like, I need a lead, though. It needs to be kind of a cool lead. And then Paul comes up with that lead, you know, in the middle of the song. And I just kind of made it my version of it, you know, the way I play in my style. But that's what I have with the old firm. It's like, you know, both Casey and Paul play guitar. And so, you know, obviously Gabe is, you know, like I said, on a different planet when it comes to playing guitar. I mean, when Kirk Hammett says, yeah, that guy's got an amazing approach and a completely amazing style that is so unique. When a guy says, like Kirk Hammett says that about you,
yes,
i.e. Gabe Gavriloff,
yes,
then you know you got something good.
do you know who my two favorite players growing up were? Kirk Hammett and Greg Ginn. Like those.
Yeah, hey man. I mean, we're talking about two completely, totally different styles, but tasteful nonetheless.
It just, when I heard Greg Ginn play for Black Flag, it was the first time that I heard like dissonance used. Like, I'm like, whoa,
Right.
that sounds so ugly. And some people might not get over the fact, you know, like later on, I got into Thurston Moore and stuff like that. And they play ugly, but man, is it fucking good.
No, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, you know, I got a guy like Gabe in the band, and the fact that I'm able to, you know, the style that we're going to and what we've been doing, and to be able to utilize the full potential, or at least, you know, scratch the surface with all these guys, you know, as a unit, it's a pretty exciting place to be. The sky's the limit. And, you know, I've been blessed, for lack of a better term, you know, number one with Rancid, then the Bastards, and now this, you know, so it's like lightning kind of has struck 3 times for me in a lot of ways, I feel. And it maybe not be on the success levels, quote unquote, you know, as, you know, the other bands or whatever, but to me, it feels the same. There's this chemistry that's happening, which I think is the most important, you know, is chemistry. If you got chemistry within, you know, the dynamic of the band, which in Rancid and the old firm, like, we have that chemistry, and it's something that, you know, you don't take for granted. You kind of, you know, cherish it, because it doesn't come around very often. I mean, for me, I feel like it's come around a lot more often than most people, just because, I don't know, that's just the way I view it. But fortunate to be in the position I'm in now, you know. But I know it's nothing that, like, I went out and I worked hard and all that stuff, and I literally don't, you know, I really don't have any strong opinions either way of how I did it. But I just feel like, you know, music was the most important thing to me in my life. And for me, being able to do it, and for as consistently as I have for the last nearly 30 years, if not longer, it's definitely, I'm definitely like, in a lot of gratitude about it, you know?
Yeah, it's an incredible story. And I just wanted to say to people listening, you are playing St. Vitus Bar in Brooklyn, New York on the 31st. But you mentioned Cro-Mags, you mentioned a few bands from the East Coast, and there is Rancid played the Black and Blue Bowl a couple years ago, and there is this connection you've made with the East Coast guys, more specifically, you know, New York Hardcore Tattoos, Black and Blue, DMS, and all of that. And I'm just curious where that all started from.
Well, I mean, I just think that we all kind of gravitated to each other, and I mean, I think that's what you do, you know. Those guys are, you know, a lot of those, you know, guys are my family, you know what I mean, and they're my brothers. And for me, you know, just the East Coast in general, I always vibed with East Coast. I mean, I just vibe with East Coasters. Maybe it's just their attitude. I don't know. I don't really, you know, I don't really have time for bullshit. You know, like California is a different trip, man. I mean, it's definitely a different trip. I'm born and raised here. I'm sort of a unicorn in the Bay Area now. Because it's just that a lot of people aren't from here, you know what I mean, anymore.
Right. And
a lot of people who are from here can't afford to live here, which is the sad part. But, you know, I've always vibed with the East Coast. You know, I was just in Cape Cod a couple days, or 4 or 5 days ago. I loved it there. You know, I'd never been there. It was the first time I'd been there. But that's like my kind of style. That's like, you know, the people are nice. It's just, you know, I vibe with that kind of thing. You know what I mean? I don't know. So to me, it's natural.
Yeah, there's a difference between the coasts, but you know, you meet the cool people, you know, and it's almost like for life. You know, if you're from East Coast and you meet West Coast people and vice versa. I mean, the walls aren't like that anymore, but I do distinctly remember years ago when you sort of like hooked up with Sick of It All, it was like weird. It was like, wow, that's awesome. And as soon as it happened, it all sort of made sense to us.
Well, you know, here's the thing about the Rancid Sick of It All stuff. I mean, at that point in time in our scene, a lot of the hardcore bands didn't play with the punk bands anymore. I mean, it was two kind of uniquely different scenes in a lot of ways. And we did that little run on the East Coast, and then we took them out on the West Coast. It was one of the first times in a long time, and I know that a lot of people can attest to this, but were those kind of the sort of crossing of those two types of bands, Sick of It All and Rancid, which are, yeah, they come from that same world, but, the hardcore thing and the punk thing wasn't really mixing, you know what I mean, at all. Because the punk thing took on a whole different thing, which, it was just, wasn't really into that whole thing. But I loved Agnostic Front growing up, you know what I mean? I loved them. I wasn't like a Maximum Rock and Roll punk rocker. I fucking hated Maximum Rock and Roll. I thought they were stupid.
Same here.
PC. I thought they were just fucking hippies. You know what I mean? So that wasn't my trip. I liked the hard edge shit. That's where I came from, man. I grew up project housing. I fucking was, doing some. I was a street kid. You know what I mean? So it's like, who do you think I'm going to relate to? Fucking, Fugazi or fucking, Agnostic Front. You know what I mean? Like Fugazi, don't throw the shoe, wear a backpack, you can't dance, or Agnostic Front, come and let's fucking, swing a bicycle chain in the pit. Like that was more my shit. You know what I mean? Like I wanted the aggressive stuff. I mean, hardcore, New York hardcore was the original American skinhead music, so that's where I identified. I identified with that passion, that raw kind of like gnarliness. That was my jam, you know what I mean? So,
and that's funny that you mentioned AF too, because was Roger really an influence on Rancid 2000?
100%, dude. Like, I mean, Roger, AF, Agnostic Front, Murphy's Law, Sheer Terror, Madball, fucking Sick of It All. I mean, the list can go on and on and on and on. We loved hardcore. In the 90s, when we were kind of at our biggest, like, I was going to so many hardcore shows. We had a band out here called Powerhouse, and the singer, Chris Powerhouse, who's like one of my best friends ever and the godfather to my oldest child, who was the singer, he was from New Jersey. Like, they held it down. They were from Oakland. They did their shit, and it was hardcore music. That's who I was chilling with. I wasn't at Gilman Street. I was chilling with the hardcore guys in East Oakland, at the bomb shelter, like that's what I was doing. I always had an affinity for the hardcore bands or the hardcore music. I mean, that was my jam. I loved the harder shit. I mean, I love punk and I love, GBH and Discharge, and I love all that stuff, but I don't know. The hardcore thing was always struck a chord with me.
Yeah, and it was in that record. It's funny because you take 1994 was such a pivotal year. You take a song like Salvation. Sure, I think Nihilism dropped first, but man, MTV. I'm an MTV kid. I was 16,
right?
It picks up Salvation, and that's where I stumble across everything. I knew Tim was in Operation Ivy, but I didn't know the first record. And from there, like in Out Come the Wolves, I don't have to tell you, the influence on that for sure. As a matter of fact, let me tell you this. I'm in a band, and we played Coney Island, and we covered You Don't Care Nothing on Saturday.
Oh, awesome.
Fucking awesome. But, and then from there to go, was it like this conscious thing to go, because those three next records are so different. You have an...
You know what, you mentioned that song. It's so funny. I don't think I've ever really shared this, but me and Tim actually cut that vocal together at the same time. We were singing back and forth on Jenny DeMille. Well, You Don't Care Nothing. We actually sang that vocal. We were in the vocal booth. They set up a vocal booth to where we could kind of see each other. So we cut that track at the same time, our lead vocals. So
it's kind of like a punk rock Run DMC song for sure, because you guys, you know what I'm saying?
Well, we were going. There was a lot of back and forth. We were sort of playing off of each other. I was kind of, he was kind of bringing it, and I was bringing it. We were playing off each other. You know what I mean? So it was like a really cool experience. We've done that a few times since then, but that was the actual first time that we really. Are you playing drums? Okay.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry, dude. I'm trying to be a parent at the same time.
We could finish soon. No worries.
No. It's not about finishing. It's just about I just got to be a parent.
Yeah,
so
man.
Every once in a while, I'm going to have to lose my train of thought. guide my children.
I've seen the other F word. It's all good. But
yeah. So I mean, that record obviously. What was your question? Let me try to answer it.
Okay, yeah. So basically, just the difference is amazing because you guys hit like certain times in music. Thanks to MTV, it's like this underground saw the light of day for a minute. So and Out Come the Wolves comes out and like it just really takes off. And on top of the fact that it just had this staying power. And then from there, I feel like you guys really went in a different direction with Life Won't Wait. And I'll tell you, man, 3 years after, right? So it came out in 98. I wanted another And Out Come the Wolves. And I was like, damn, I was kind of bummed out about it. And years later, I started listening to the record, and it's like one of my favorite Rancid records. I just wasn't ready for it at the time. I don't know why, And so what was that difference in like you guys just wanted to make something completely left field, or the songs, because it was such a varied mixed bag?
Yeah, there was a lot of upheaval at that time. Brett Gurewitz was sort of who normally produced a lot of our all of our records, or had some sort of part of it, was sort of MIA with his drug addiction. It was just a different time. I mean, and me and Tim produced that record, so and I don't think we had any self-restraint either at that time. We just kind of kept going for it. Like we would get different ideas, or whatever, and we would just I don't know. It's a different trip, man. I mean, it wasn't as I can't say it. I can say this. I can say it wasn't as focused as Out Come the Wolves or the subsequent records that came after Life Won't Wait. But I think we needed to do that in a lot of ways to kind of like find kind of what we were going to do in the future. You know what I mean? Like it took a long time. It took a long time for us to, to kind of, I don't know how to explain it. I mean, we were just in a different place. You know what I mean? We were in a different place. And when it hit, than we were with Wolves,
Yeah, and when it hit, like young me, because I was like a young kid, and like when when you have a band that makes that record, and I was like, damn, I really wanted to hear more of this. But in all reality, as a musician myself, I'm like, why the fuck would I want them to make the same record that they already made? And it just grew on me, like songs like The Wolf. What is that? Corazón de Oro. Coppers. That was so different. And Coppers really reminded me of the song you guys put on that comp number 2 with Buju Banton.
Yeah.
Man. I mean, I feel like you guys just kind of like, I don't know, grew on that, and we all went along for the ride. And then Rancid 2000 came, and I don't know, you guys, I could sit here and just keep going, so I'll just stop. But yeah, it was such a difference between those 3 records, and that's the sign of a band that's super confident and didn't give a shit. And on top of everything, you guys all wrote great records.
Well, thank you, bro. I appreciate that. This phone that I'm talking on is about to run out of batteries.
Yeah. We'll do the last question. Which is the name of the podcast is If I Rule the World. So we ask every single one of our guests if you rule the world. So Lars, if you rule the world, what would that look like?
Well, I don't want to rule the world. Honestly, it's too much responsibility. I don't know. I don't know what that would look like.
Okay. All right. Because it's a question Sam and I have said I couldn't answer either. So I'm kind of with you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not that power hungry.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't know. I don't really know what that would look like. I don't know. I don't know if I could answer that question. And well, it's kind of like the honest question is I don't want that responsibility, nor would I take that on. You know what I mean? And
that's the answer. It's kind of a Rorschach test. What you answer is how you think, and it kind of makes sense coming from you, Lars.
Right.
Where you're at. All right. So we're gonna let you go, but all right, Lars, appreciate it. Thanks so much, brother.
Yeah, Lars.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Okay.
If I rule the world.